Hello, Lynette, and hi, Tracy. Welcome to another episode of our Spotlight series brought to you in partnership with Dentons. My name is Julia Celeru. I'm the co-founder of PropTech Collective, a not-for-profit community focused on bridging the communication and knowledge silos between the PropTech and real estate worlds. I'm grateful to be joined today by my co-host, Tracy Molina, who I'll invite to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Julia, so much for inviting me to help out with this podcast today. So as Julia said, I'm Tracy Molino, counsel in our Dentons Toronto office, where my practice focuses sort of 50-50 on traditional bank regulatory work with a highlight on consumer protection and retail lending, and then the fintech and other tech space. So really anything that involves the movement of value, new financial services and innovative products. That's where I spend a lot of my time. I spend less time in the prop tech space, so I'm always excited to drop in and learn a little bit more and sort of stretch my knowledge into a space that I'm not super familiar with. So I'm excited to be here today.
Thanks, Tracy, for joining us. And every month we've partnered with Dentons to highlight the diverse stories of founders, investors, and change-making real estate professionals that are part of the PropTech collective community. So today we'll learn more about their experiences and trends that they're seeing in the space. And we're thrilled to have Lynette join us. Lynette is essentially the managing partner for Reach Canada, the #1 accelerator in real estate. So thanks so much for joining us. And why don't we kick it off with the first question? We'll go deep into your darkest secrets. I'm just kidding, but I'm just curious to learn more about your path to getting to where you are today.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Julia and Tracy. It's such a pleasure to be here and grateful to be invited on the series. I've been an avid listener of the Spotlight series, so it's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. So yeah, my path and my journey, as I was just saying, an intro prior to recording. I probably should have saved a little bit of the background, but we'll do it again. I've had practice now. So I've really been in the real estate space for about 15 years here in Canada, but mostly on the association side of the business. So my background's actually in agricultural economics. I'm a prairie girl from Saskatchewan that grew up on a farm. And of course, that was the natural progression, but really got introduced to organization and organizational development and found myself introduced to an opportunity inside the Real Estate Association in Regina and really kind of fell in love with the real estate sector. I found it interesting and fascinating kind of how the industry was organized, everything from brokers to agents to how the associations managed listings and sales. And it was really my role to oversee technology for the association and how we evaluated and delivered what was becoming more of an online process at that time. So that was really kind of my introduction to this crazy world of what is now called PropTech. It wasn't called PropTech back then. It was just called technology and being on the internet. And so things have evolved quite substantially since those early days. So fast forward, the industry, like I said, has treated me really well. I had the opportunity to, really learn a lot about how the industry was organized, how technology was delivered. But I was also curious about why we weren't innovating as quickly as, say, our counterparts in the US, especially. And so I kind of, because I'm curious by nature, took it upon myself to learn a little bit more, meet more people, become more integrated with what that trajectory looked like in the US especially. And through that journey had been introduced to the managing partners of Second Century Ventures. So Second Century Ventures is the venture capital arm of NAR, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later. But it really gave me an opportunity to evaluate kind of technology as it was being innovated from the ground up, as opposed to just consuming technology that was already available. So fast forward, I went from managing technology in one association to becoming the CEO of another association in Western Canada for 7 or 8 years, and then decided that I really did sort of need to get out of that organizational world to really focus a lot more on the technology aspects, because it's really kind of where my heart lies, is in the entrepreneurial context of, how we continue to do what this industry does, but do it better and bring better solutions to the table.
What an incredible journey. And I absolutely love how you continue to follow your curiosity through this path, right? Because I do think that now that you're in the world of technology and innovation, there's lots of learning to be done every single day. I'll pass it off to Tracy to kind of ask you the next question, since we're here to also learn a little bit more about Reach Canada.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So in heading up Reach Canada, can you give us a little bit more background on how it got started, its connection to NAR, a little bit about Second Century, and why you think that Reach Canada is so beneficial for early stage companies?
Absolutely. So again, Reach has been around since about 2013, 2014, and it was really one of Second Century Ventures' first investments. And so I'll back the truck up just a little bit. So back in 2007, 2008, the National Association of Realtors, along with a lot of other real estate associations, was celebrating 100 years of the Realtor brand. So the Realtor brand had really been around that long, which meant organized real estate has been operating with varying types of technology, albeit maybe not online and digitized back in the day, but for over 100 years. And they had established a number of 100-year initiatives to really look toward powering that Realtor brand into the next century. And so they viewed technology and investing in technology as one of those pillars, and hence Second Century Ventures was fully capitalized as an investment arm to really focus on technology that would power the agent and the consumer into sort of that next evolution of real estate and transactions. So Second Century started to make some really great early investments, such like DocuSign, Updater, BombBomb, or some of those early investments that have obviously gone on and done very well. But what they realized was a couple of things. As an investment arm, they wanted to get a little earlier in the cycle, so they wanted to be introduced to great technology a bit earlier on, even before they were sort of ready to invest. And so they were looking for a little bit of a top of the funnel deal flow mechanism, but there was also a real need to ensure that the technology that they were focused on was transcending into the hands of the practitioners that NAR represented. And so Reach was born in 2013. So from 2013 until 2019, they worked with 6 to 8 companies each year in the US, largely focused on residential solutions, largely focused on sort of that agent consumer transactional component, and scaled about 60 companies to about 2019. Come 2019, there was an expansion in a couple of ways. So first of all, they expanded the US program to now focus specifically on commercial solutions. So the commercial sector, relatively under innovated. So now there are 2 US programs running, one focused on residential, one on commercial. And they also began to expand the program globally with a view that a number of companies from around the world had expressed interest in, had applied to the Reach program, but there was now also a number of companies in the portfolio that were coming back to the managing partners to say, hey, like, you know, we've done really well in the US, but there's a lot of world out there that still focuses on real estate. And can you help us kind of scale into some of these other places around the world? So Reach began to expand globally. We have 3 programs running outside the US, Australia and Southeast Asia, here in Canada, and one in the UK. So just to round that out, Tracy, in the context of, from a Canadian perspective, what our view is, and you know how we are beneficial to early stage technology companies. Well, again, as an association CEO in Canada, I felt that we were really under innovated in the Canadian ecosystem. There's really no entity that focuses on scaling property technology in Canada. I think, as Julia and your co-founders from the PropTech Collective understand, that ecosystem was really shallow. And as more capital has been spent on scaling technology, particularly in the real estate sector, I think we really provide a voice similar to the PropTech Collective around how to really connect real estate, technology, and capital. So that's kind of how we view ourselves in the ecosystem, as we sit at that intersection. And we're a connector and a hub for those that are looking for great technology, that might have capital that they want to park, and who are really looking to enhance their value in real estate.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And yes, I have to say that obviously having been in prop tech for about 4 or 5 years now, like I've also seen kind of the
Mhm.
acceleration in adoption at least a little bit, which is great, but we still have a lot of work to do. So I'm curious. Obviously, Reach Canada has been around for a few years. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about this year's class of prop tech startups, and just to have you describe a little bit more about some of the problems that they're solving.
Yeah, we're really excited about our class this year. And so maybe I'll just take a quick minute to sort of frame up how we select a class, because I
Yeah.
think, there's a little bit of, I mean, I get really excited about it, but there's a little bit of intent behind how we choose the companies that we work with in any given year. So first of all, typically we target anywhere between 6 and 10 investments every year. So 6 and 10 companies that we look to work with. And it's really based on a couple of very, very core components. First and foremost, they have to pass the no a-holes test, right? We just really want to work with good people. And here's the thing, founders are generally just really good people that want to solve good problems, right? So we have that test and it allows us to kind of like narrow it down, but only a little bit, because most of them are really great people. We want to work with them all. So that's one. But the second is, are these companies out there solving a real problem, right? So it's a little bit of the vitamin versus the pill approach. And we certainly want to work with companies that have identified a challenge that hasn't been addressed, or hasn't been addressed to the degree that the market can kind of bear, right? So, it's not just tweaking sort of the same old, same old. It's about really thinking about what the future of the industry and the economy kind of is looking for and focusing on those solutions. And the third part is, we really want the cohort of companies, whether it's 6 or 8 or 10, to really add value to one another. So we use this word accretive a lot in our world. So it's really about being accretive to one another. So we're looking for that 1 + 1 = 3 equation. We always want to solve that. And so that's sort of how we frame a class. This year, we are so excited because first of all, we were able to I want to say coerce, that's the wrong word. We were able to entice all 10 of the startups that we had targeted into our class,
Amazing.
kind of with that frame of reference. And so we're working with solutions kind of, I would say, across the spectrum from what we would call search to keys. So it's really everything from how does a real estate agent qualify leads for their business, sort of all the way through. Let me back up. First of all, it's through that rental process, right? That is almost always underestimated or undervalued. How do we ensure that people get access to great quality housing and homes? So we really are starting to expand what the spectrum looks like from that home ownership ladder point of view. So, we're working with rental listing agencies that really focus on educating consumers around how to save for home ownership, et cetera. We're working with startups that are focused on really enhancing consumers' knowledge around the financial aspects of homeownership, so that when they get a mortgage, they also see the value of working toward not just being able to save for down payment, but post-purchase, what the net worth of their home, or how the ownership of that home is affecting their net worth. So again, focusing on these really core fundamental kind of societal concerns or societal issues out there. We have startups that are focused on when you're looking for a home, just making that experience as accessible to as many people as possible. So with COVID as an example, the demand for virtual home tours, virtual tours, exploded through the roof. But a lot of people don't feel the need to go back into that in-home open house environment, or I don't need to get in my car to drive everywhere, but I still want to see the property. So we really love, some of those visual solutions as well that allow consumers accessibility to homes. Right through to, I would say, transparency, big, and we're going to talk about trends. I know we're seeing a big push toward transparency. So again, from that search to keys component, transparency right from the beginning to when I make my offer, I want to know who I'm competing with, or at least the other offers that I'm competing with. right through to, okay, the deal is now closed. I want to be able to see where my transaction is at any given time, at the lawyers, at the appraisers, at the at the lending side. And so again, creating transparency is a massive trend that we're seeing, and we have a couple of solutions that are focused on those aspects. And the last thing I'll say is really sustainability. We think there's a whole, especially from a Canadian point of view, there's a lot of runway here. We have a lot of government funding that's being directed towards sustainability. And so we have a couple of companies in our portfolio right now that are focused on helping homeowners really address from an approachable way the sustainability aspects of their home right now.
Super interesting. And I love the fact that you're kind of, the journey that you say from like search all the way to actually getting the keys and managing that entire process, because as you say, there's so many pockets of innovation that can happen right now. So we just have to support, I guess, the ecosystem to grow. And I also like the fact that you mentioned at the beginning, obviously it's a selection process to go through an accelerator program. And I have experience in going through this selection process, but I always find that when you're talking to founders, there's so many kind of accelerator programs that exist there, right? Like it's kind of now been like, okay, which one did you attend and why? So I guess as a question for you, as the founders wonder whether or not this might be the right accelerator program from them, is there any advice that you can give them around making a decision of whether or not they should apply to Reach?
I think it's like a lot of things in life, Julia, kind of know what your objective is before you go in, right? And then do your homework. And so the way we approach our program at Reach is very, very bespoke. So again, I've talked about how we create the cohort. That's very bespoke. So, we don't have sort of this narrow window of this is only who we're going to work with and only these types of solutions, because we want that ability to have the ecosystem generate the value in and of itself. And it's the same way we develop our curriculum, right? And so we develop the curriculum kind of to the needs of the companies we bring in, without having a conversation with me, without having a conversation with anyone on my team, or having a conversation with a founder that's previously gone through this program. It would be very difficult for a founder to really get a sense of whether this program is the right one for them. And I would argue that's likely the same for any of the other programs that are out there. However, it's super important, even when you're doing your homework, to know what your objective is. So is your objective growth? Is your objective, I really just need to get my house in order? Is your objective, I don't know where to start on the path, right? And every founder's at a little bit of a different phase. And I think the best thing any founder can do when you're evaluating a program is to be open about kind of where you're at, what you're hoping to accomplish, and also be really honest with yourself about what you don't know, right? Because I think, there's a lot of expectations around, I'm at a certain stage and I just need this. And so it's just being open to, sort of hearing back about where your best opportunities lie for growth. And so I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can give, is kind of get clear on what your objective is, and then do your homework and determine if it's the right fit for you in terms of where you're at, and also, are these people that I want to work with?
Well put. I really appreciate that, and also the honesty, because I think that building up that self-awareness from not only the founding team, but also what the business needs is an important step, and even knowing what to ask for, right? So you got to have that first step. But
absolutely.
And this is so great, because I have so many questions that I feel like I could ask you, because I always say that I don't have a lot of exposure to prop tech, but then as you talk about it, as somebody who has really spent a concerted effort focusing their career on consumer financial education, consumer protection, the use of consumer analytics and data to help inform consumer decisions, there are obviously lots of touch points along that process, right, up to getting to keys that really I deal with on a daily basis, and think that there are probably lots of opportunities where I actually am more involved in a lot of the prop tech work than I think. But so I don't want to take us totally off track, but I think, working in the pay tech space, I see a ton of great ideas, tons of great ideas, and very little success. So, I think I'd be interested in hearing what you think some of the markers are that distinguish these sort of good startups from really great ones that make a real go of it in your industry, and what the differences are between them.
Yeah, it's such a great question because there are so many variables, right? And, I think when it comes back to, and I think about the startups that have done very well in the Reach portfolio as an example, and I'll say, right back to 2013, there are some very, very consistent threads through there. First and foremost, it's always have a beginner's mindset, right? So it doesn't matter how successful you've been on this first leg of the journey. It's really about how much you need to learn to be successful on the next leg of the journey. And so, some of my favorite people that we have in this portfolio that have done really, really well have retained that and are still as humble today and as curious today as they were, when they first came into the program. And so I think that's a really important component for good founders, is that curiosity and that beginner's mindset and the willingness to learn from others around them, right? So always sort of seeking, feedback and, and iterating on the feedback as you're receiving it. Because I think, again, that's the other important component is your idea. My great ideas from where I sit today are based on my own personal experience, right? But if I'm not selling to somebody that's exactly like me, I'm probably the worst person to provide iterative feedback, right? So building in those measurement systems and getting feedback across your business, and being open to that, I think has been another hallmark of great founders, is building that into the culture of your business. Is feedback is a gift, and we take it and we iterate on the basis of that. And so I think, that's the other component. And the third is really that cultural piece, right? It's, the company from a founding perspective really has to emanate you. And so what is that what is that values and cultural path that you carve out for yourself, that your company, the people, the consumer, all of those that you interface with really understand and can buy into, right? And I think that's what makes the difference between great startups. I mean, other than that, if you look at all the other variables like capital and timing and, connections, anybody can access those, right? They're all equally available to everyone. And so, sure, there's a few elements of those things all being in the right place that can be helpful. But I think those core consistencies are really around values, consistency, the beginner's mindset, and really kind of iterating on feedback that you seek and receive.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And I probably put it slightly differently, but I think we're probably talking about the same thing. And in a financial services space, and I suspect it's probably the same in the real estate sector, it's much more complex once you start to learn about it than it might seem at first. So something, that seems like an easily solvable problem from the outside, once you start digging, you realize a lot of smart people have tried to solve this in the past as well. And there's a reason why it's so complicated and tough to solve. So I think if you have that real beginner's mindset and you're also open to feedback, you can really learn from some of the mistakes or kind of the pitfalls maybe that other people have fallen into when they're trying to solve their problems. So building on that advice, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges for startups to scale up, particular to Canada, maybe as opposed to the US in particular?
Yeah, and I mean, your points are super well taken, Tracy. I think, you're absolutely right. We've seen, a number of these nuts trying to be cracked over a number of years, right? And so timing is certainly a component as well. And I think it's, a lot like, a lot of great innovation in the world. The people that you are trying to innovate for need to be ready for it as much as you've developed the right thing, right? So it's less about it wasn't done right, or it wasn't done well, or didn't consider all of the complexities, because those things are kind of ever evolving, right? That's a very dynamic landscape. I think it's mostly around sort of mindset, as it is with most things, and timing, right? And I think that isn't more true than it is for the real estate sector today, especially in Canada. Again, traditionally been a lagged sector from an adoption point of view. I would argue, and Julie, I'd be curious from both of you, sort of your perspective. I think Canadians are just a lot more complacent. We haven't had as much traditionally, as much of that kind of entrepreneurial, maybe that's the wrong word to say, but sort of that risk, I think our risk profile, is just a lot more averse, right, from a Canadian point of view. And certainly we also haven't had as many of the resources. I mean, I've seen, the capital markets in Canada just increase dramatically over the last number of years. And I think that traditionally hasn't been the case, right? And so again, all of those things kind of take time to evolve. And I think the other piece of it is because of the size of our market in the real estate sector, Canada hasn't always been a great target for innovation because there's just such a bigger runway in the US, like, by 10x. And so, typically I think that's at least, or traditionally, that's how I've seen innovation happen in the Canadian real estate sector is, things are innovated in the US. There's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more opportunity for forgiveness. And then it kind of comes to Canada once it's been kind of tried and true. And that meets sort of our conservative adoptive tendencies from a philosophical point of view as well. But, I do think that's changing. I think that cycle is getting a lot shorter. I think the fact that, folks like us and PropTech Collective and a few others have popped up in Canada are helping propel that forward and bring a little bit more attention to that space. And I also think that Canada is now seen as a really nice landing place because of the ecosystem that is being developed for a lot of these innovations to get their legs under them and then approach the US market. At least that's how we're seeing, a lot of the objectives for those folks that we have an opportunity to chat with. And, I think, again, you look at our portfolio, 6 out of the 10 are Canadian domicile, but that means 4 are domiciled somewhere else. And they still chosen to work with the Canadian program because there are benefits for them from a scale and growth point of view. So I think that's shifting a little bit, and I'm hopeful that it continues to go in that direction.
Yeah, no, I think it's very similar to the conversations that we've been having, obviously, as PropTech Collective with folks in the industry. I think the capital requirements just generally, there's just not as much money essentially flowing in the Canadian ecosystem to help propel this investment forward. So I think that's adding to the risk adverseness. But with that said, we've had, the Shopify's kind of start being an exit. We have Lightspeed. We have a bunch of different companies that I think I'm fingers crossed that a lot more angel investors are going to come in to kind of change that mindset and landscape. But obviously from a startup challenges and scaling, we can give advice to founders on how they can, deal with these challenges and programs, take advantage of programs like Reach and PropTech Collective, for example, to kind of open up some more doors. But at the same time, obviously, we have to educate the industry side as well, right? So that's kind of the interesting point that we're at. So I'm curious, at the risk, maybe this is a risky question, maybe not, but what is the mindset that you'd wish that the real estate industry would adopt for 2022?
Oh my gosh, I have said this out loud so many times. It's not a risky question, not from my perspective, Julia, not at all. I mean, this was the mindset shift that I was, hoping to try and insight from the inside of the industry, right? Prior to, because I think it's so core and fundamental to, not just the success of the technology side, because I don't see them disparate. It's not technology versus the industry.
Yeah.
And I think, I just was sort of level set my response to this question on that note is, for so long, I think the industry saw technology as a disintermediating effect, right? Mm-hmm. It was going to come and take away the industry. And, the one thing that I've learned, and I can't say loud enough, is technology only augments what people already do so beautifully, proficiently, excellently, brilliantly, all of those words, right? Technology only enhances the relational components of what makes real estate such a strong and unique sector in the economy. And so, I think that's the piece, that's the mindset shift, is technology isn't a disintermediating component, it's an enhancement component, right? And it will only enhance everything that you're already doing really well if the industry, right down to the, you know, micro of an agent or, you know, somebody on the ground, really thinks about what are the things that I do well or could do better or need to do better, and how can technology facilitate that for me, right? So it's not about how do I go away or being afraid to adopt something because it will innovate you out of a role. It's about really looking at it in terms of powering your own growth forward. So I think that's the mindset shift. And the other piece that I'll put behind that is, you know, really investing, right? Because if the industry isn't investing in technology that's evolving, then somebody else is, because there's a lot of capital out there. And I think the industry for too long has sat on the sidelines and not been able to take advantage of the technology they do adopt in terms of benefiting from the returns that technology provides, right? And so we're seeing this a little bit in the US, again, not quite as much in Canada yet, but this is beginning in the US, where we have MLSs and associations that would typically be users of technology or facilitators of technology, now actually purchasing technology firms in some instances, investing their own equity and capital into technology that enhances their members' businesses, that enhances the businesses that they and the services they provide. And I think that's a piece of the mindset shift that I would encourage the Canadian landscape to also sort of think about, understand, and potentially even begin to go down the road of, because I know the industry has a lot of capital, and I think this is a place where you can see some return on that capital, is, you know, investing in the resources that are going to help power you forward in your business and in your sector.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great point around disintermediation and the fear around that. And one of the things that I always think of in the financial services sector is, you know, the intermediaries didn't just arise because of inefficiencies in the system, right? There's a value add to that intermediation a lot of the time, and I think it can be very easy for founders and also for the intermediaries themselves to think of themselves exclusively as cost centers that need to be eliminated, instead of touch points that provide added value or that help reduce costs overall for the end user, or they provide an education component. So I think, you know, it's a really great way to look at it, that of course can be some inefficiencies, but that doesn't mean necessarily that the ideal system is, you know, completely disintermediated and is sort of direct to consumer for every single product. So I think that, you know, it's an equally strong point in the real estate sector for sure. But I think that, you know, the last sort of big idea question that I wanted to ask was just if there are any specific trends that really excite you about 2022, and why you find them so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many, actually. Well, so many. I guess I can narrow it down to a couple, and a couple we've already talked about because we've focused on for our class of 2022. But, you know, I think the whole sustainability piece is really going to continue to evolve. And it's, you know, I think, you know, for some, it's sort of all wrapped up in the environmental components that COVID is now kind of fast tracked, and kind of safety and, you know, all of those aspects. And there is that bit of it from an environmental component, but it's really around sustainability. We're seeing a lot of consumers on the ground really demand, you know, access to sustainable products and sustainable mechanisms inside their home. And so it's really around, how do you innovate sort of that entire ecosystem of existing and new housing stock that's coming onto the market, right, to really fit into these sustainable buckets. And I think, like everything, there will be a little bit of a pendulum swing around, well, what does sustainability mean, right? And I think that's what's so exciting about this, is there's so much runway here. It will be fun to sort of see where we land on that, what is sustainable and what's, you know, what isn't sustainable. But certainly a lot of innovation coming out of the UK, out of Europe around this piece, and we're starting to see a lot more momentum around that in Canada especially. So exciting to see that. The second, and again, I know I mentioned this already, but we're hearing this sort of right across the industry ecosystem, sort of the consumer agent collaboration piece and transparency piece. Like, that's been on the radar for a long time, but I'm only now in the last sort of 12 months seeing that narrative kind of narrow in terms of what that really means. So for a long time we heard, oh, just a, one-stop shop platform, just a single platform. Well, for what, right? And I think what we're really starting to see is something that allows, again, the consumer to be more a part of that process, and for, their practitioners to be a more to that process as well. So ultimately, it's just a more holistic way of transacting real estate. We're seeing that a lot. And, Tracy, I know you mentioned that you focus a lot on sort of, the digital currency world. And I think that could be a component of it in the future. And so I think that trend is beginning now, but in ways that are really bringing more transparency into the current processes that we have in place, right? Which allows the entire ecosystem to gain confidence, so that, the evolution towards something a little bit more digitized becomes more acceptable. So I'm excited about that trend. And I think the third piece is really around, we've talked a lot around the affordability question, but it's accessibility to home ownership. And I think that's a trend that we're only going to continue to see evolve in a number of different ways, right? So everything from, different home ownership models to, different access to financing around home ownership, right through to something that isn't really on our radar yet, from a reach perspective, but we're really beginning to research, is construction tech, right? Yeah. How can we evolve, technology around construction to make it, to really focus in on cost, to really focus in on speed to market, to address some of these bigger challenges that we have around supply and accessibility and affordability. And so I'm excited to see where that evolves, whether or not we're players in that. I think that's a trend we see coming on as well.
Yeah, I'm so excited because you're literally hopefully painting the future with your words right now, and more people are going to listen and want to make it happen, because I do believe that, yeah, sustainability, also construction tech in terms of affordability, and as well the transparency is really going to set a solid foundation for prop tech into the future. So thanks for sharing those words. As we're done with the hard questions, and now at the end of every episode, we want to do, I call it a more personal, I guess, insights into Lynette, because we are people at the end of the day, and this is how you build community. So we have a series of rapid fire questions, which you haven't seen before. So Tracy's gonna just kick it off and have some fun with this.
All right.
Sure. Okay, here we go. So aside from where you live, where's your favorite place?
Oh my gosh, anywhere with a beach and a lot of sun, which is the furthest from where I am right now.
The furthest from all of us, I think, right now. If you weren't running Reach, what would you be doing?
Oh my gosh, really great question. I don't know. If I wasn't running Reach, I'll be honest, it would be something likely in health tech or fitness tech.
I like that, fitness tech. That's a whole other podcast.
Oh yeah.
What's a book that you always recommend?
Start with Why, Simon Sinek.
Oh, that's a good choice. If you had any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, if I had any superpower. It's so funny. I've probably been asked this question I don't know how many times already. And I don't know if I ever have the same answer twice. A superpower for me would be omniscience, but not like in terms of seeing kind of everything. It would be only because I would love to, and I know this is part of the learning, but I would love to be able to remove barriers and challenges that I can see people have. So it's one of the best things I love about my job is, you can make recommendations, or you see things objectively and you can share a perspective, but sometimes you just want to get that thing out of somebody's way, because you can see that it will clear. And it's the same way as being a mom, but there's value in the learning as well. So
that's a great superpower. And then I think this is my favorite question. If you could time travel to any time, what time would that be?
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, don't judge me. I love Elizabethan England for whatever reason.
That's what I would say too.
I just have a fondness in my heart for it. I don't even know why, but I mean, I just love that time period.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I would choose as well. Only with modern day medicine and probably
Yeah, and
yeah,
best.
Yeah.
exactly.
That's
That's it.
amazing.
That's our quick fire
Oh my
questions.
God,
So you
those are great.
passed.
That's
Well,
fun.
thank you. Well, thank you. I was sweating for
No,
a second there. There was no prep opportunity.
no, this is fun. It's supposed to be spontaneous. But I guess like our last question, do you have any asks for the PropTech Collective community?
Well, you know, I feel like we are already so sort of in sync in terms of what we do. But what I love is we've kind of been running in parallel to one another. And so I would love for anybody of the prop tech community we would love to get to know you as well. And, you know, similar to what you and Courtney have done, Julia, with your ecosystem, we're really about just building ecosystem and making certain that our view is really the more lens we have into what's going on in the landscape, the more value we can add and create. And so if you're interested in just getting to know more about us, please reach out. If you're interested in mentoring our companies, whether you're inside the real estate industry or not, if you're working ancillary to the industry, please let us know. I know there's just so many kind souls out there who just want to help and be involved. And so we're always interested in bringing on new mentors. I think we are all experiencing this right now, right? So many of our technology companies are looking for great talent, like everybody is. And so we have a job board that we want to share back and forth with the PropTech Collective community as well. So if you're looking for work, we probably have opportunities. If you're, you know, a number of our companies are seeking people. And so we would love to help on that side as well in terms of providing resources. And if anybody just wants to learn a little bit more about any of our other programs around the world and what that would look like, please reach out to us as well.
That is awesome. Thank you, Lynette. We're going to make sure to put all the links in the actual YouTube description as well, so people can find you easily. But many thanks to you and Tracy. Thank you both for joining us and for helping bring this Spotlight series to life. For all our listeners, if you share the same values and have an active interest in building up your professional network in the PropTech ecosystem, please follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. We also have both free and paid memberships, company memberships for PropTech Collective. So you can learn more about those on our website. So anyway, we're always open for feedback and on future topics of interest. So if you have any suggestions, please get in touch with us, hello@proptechcollective.com. And with that, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you again to our speakers, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Julia and Tracy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.